first Alien movie?
I think the Man Plaza was the theater. Wasn't that the main the Man Plaza in Westwood? Am I thinking the Plaza? No, the Bruin. No, not the Bruin. The Plaza. I think that was the main theater that showed 70 millimeter, wasn't it? Because they had that large curved screen, didn't they?
Wasn't that? But well, I think there's both the Man Ruin and the Man Village, right?
Yeah,
No.
but I think the largest screen was the Plaza. The one that used to be across from there was a Hollywood video store there. I think that was the one around the block, and I think I saw Can't Stop the Music there, and I also saw, well, I mean, just recently, I didn't grow up in Westwood, so I didn't really see first run features there, but I do recall seeing Face Off, and it had two stories. There was a stand on both levels, and they were huge, like huge concession stands on both levels. If I'm not mistaken, it's kind of like the Cinerama Dome, where it has that sort of carpeted sort of half circular walkway where you're going up, and then the seating is there, on the first level, and then you go up the stairs to go to the what do they call it, the mezzanine, technically mezzanine balcony, and that's actually a huge screen, and so I think that's where all of the 70 millimeter films showed in Westwood, was at that theater, because the curvature too, but it depends on the movie. I mean,
What about
like
some?
I know you said like Alien, so yeah, I mean, Alien is, people there's this misconception that because it's widescreen anamorphic cinemascope, or even, or 70 millimeter 65, that you need to have these horses and these vast landscapes, but you don't. I mean, like a movie like Solaris is, well, I mean, half the movie's set at home, but then the other half's in a space center, a pod, which is a confined space. And 2001 is the same thing. I mean, the idea of the universe being expansive, that works for the widescreen format, but equally you can do good character piece that's in anamorphic cinemascope, like 235 ratio, uh, which is interesting because with film history and restoration being the way they are now, or even with the way they've been the better part of 40 years, something like Vertigo was shot in 65 millimeter. Wait, was it 65? But it was
It's
never
not big.
it was never shown that way till the restoration. But I think it was because it was shot in VistaVision. So what they did is they took the VistaVision, which was a format that went left to right. It was projected. It was filmed in camera left to right, like you were shooting a horizontal image, as the film went horizontally, as opposed to a traditional film camera where the film goes vertically. Uh,
Oh, okay.
So in the case of Vertigo, they took the VistaVision frame and put it within a 70 millimeter frame, so you get a greater resolution, and then ultimately 70, you get 6-track sound or 7-track, and that's why I hate the 97 restoration of Vertigo, because to get those seven, because Vertigo was a monaural mix movie when it first came out in 1958, and so then for the restoration 97, that was like, the era of, remember SDDS, like Sony Digital Dynamic Sound, and I think there was even one called CED, which Dick Tracy used. And then, well, basically what I'm saying is there were 7 channels at that time, and so to get Vertigo into that many channels, they had to add fake sound effects. Not fake, but they added, like, a new bird atmosphere track in the background, or they added waves. Well, it's really noticeable in the scene when, I think when when they're going to see when they're at the forest and she runs away and they start kissing, and then the waves crash. It's so overdone the way they added all those sound effects. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's not the way it should sound. I get that Hitchcock didn't mix it that way, but they could have approximated it. into more of how the movie could have sounded like in 1958 in 70 millimeter, you get a better accuracy. But it was a release that the 97 release was a digital formatted sound, right? It was 7 channels with digital. It wasn't like 1959 or even later on, like Sound of Music, they had the 70 millimeter releases had 4 channels of magnetic sound, a magnetic strip of sound, on both sides of the frame, left and right. So then you had 2 channels of each, sometimes 3. Like Fame. Fame. You said Fame was shown in 70. Yeah, it was. I mean, obviously it was. And to get that sound,
Well,
the 3 channel sound. I don't know that that's the best example of a movie that needs to be converted to 70, but maybe they did it for the sound. I'd much rather see, like Grease or Saturday Night Fever. I think Grease is scope, so that widescreen image would work better. But both Grease and Saturday Night Fever were, well, especially Saturday Night Fever, since I think it was a pretty short schedule, it's a quick shooting schedule. So they were using faster speed stocks that Eastman came out in the 70s. Like I think the French Connection took advantage of it because a lot of that was, available natural lighting in each scene. And so it was like taking a Pelham 123. Like they just added some kind of small lights underneath in the underground subway, but that's basically was there were they didn't bring in any arc lights or tungsten lights to shoot the film because there are faster speed stocks. I couldn't tell you what they were at the time. I mean, my guess that they used to be ASA, what we call ISO was known as ASA then in the 70s and 80s. And it'd be like how fast the film stock can capture an image, light passing through the lens and so forth. But what I'm saying, my point is that they were using cheaper stocks, so they were grainier. So like when you see French Connection projected, like I don't mean like a DCP. I mean like when you actually see a 1971 print or even a reissue, a 76 print or 80 print, you still see a lot of grain in that movie, and you definitely see a lot of grain in Saturday Night Fever. Grease is grainy, and it's an anamorphic movie. But again, like I think on Grease, when you see when you see it today, it's coming off of it's not like everything on DCP now is coming off of the O and the OC and the original camera negative. So faces are sharp. There's great latitudes for the color, and you're seeing movies with much more dense color data than you would have even back then, which I don't necessarily like because I like seeing how the stock looked at the time and what type of grain, but people have no clue. Like when you actually see Taxi Driver, it's a pretty grainy movie, especially that last reel when which Scorsese was forced to change because of the graphic violence that the MPA threatened an X rating of. So he had to. What he did was instead of re-edit the whole scene and take out all the blood, he just basically took the last reel, the last 10 minutes, and he desaturated it. So the blood, instead of crimson, it was a little more on the blackish side, let's say, and just the overall feeling was less, less dramatic. You could, I guess the word is less gory. But when you see that last reel in a theater, like of a print of that vintage, or even of like a reissue print from the 80s, you're gonna see that grain. A lot of that was fast. So it's like something like that couldn't necessarily convert well for a 70 millimeter conversion. And then why would you want to do that on Taxi Driver anyway? It's supposed to be on the streets. If he wanted to, he probably would shoot it. He would have shot it in 16 millimeter because he wanted that maverick kind of you are there on the street feel. Like I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, what's your personal take on that?
yeah, you're right about that. It sounds interesting. All those things you're saying, because on the street, New York City, around there, yeah, it seems exactly right about those things. About Mark Scorsese, the director, right? And
Yeah, they
I
were
didn't see
they
half the
they they,
films.
they were doing 70 millimeter because there wasn't IMAX at the time. I think the first IMAX movies were 19. I don't know. I think the first IMAX movies were like 82, 83.
Yeah,
And then there was the idea that show scan might be the technology to go with because Doug Trumbull was pushing for show scan, which was basically standard 35 millimeter, but it was projected at 60 frames a second, so it gave you a sort of you are there immediate moment. But IMAX ended up winning that sort of the large format war, so then they ended up doing that, and so forever for the longest time, large format in terms of IMAX, it sort of meant either something educational, collegiate, or like an event. Because if they did like, well, I don't think they ever, well they did some concerts, didn't they, in 70 in IMAX? I don't remember what they did though, right? But
the
apart
Rolling
from
Stones.
did they do that? Yeah, and then apart from that, they did the which wasn't an IMAX movie, but it showed at the IMAX, what they call it, an OmniMax. Remember, IMAXs were the big they were standard like platform seating, and the screen was straight at you, whereas the OmniMax was the one where you lie down because you were actually inside a planetarium. So you'd lie down and look up the screen. Those were called OmniMax. So they had one in San Diego at the Fleet Space Center, and
I didn't know that.
that's why I saw a lot of these early IMAX movies that were actually in Omnimax. So you're I don't know what lens they were using, but it had to have been ultra wide because you're basically projecting half of the dome, half of the shell, it's like half of Earth. Uh, so that was for the longest time, and so 70 wasn't used as a as a format. I mean, think about it. You think about like 35 millimeter. It's crazy how cumbersome it was, and it's crazy how we lived through all that. But just the idea of shipping the canisters, and each Goldberg can or case has 3 reels or 4 reels, and then each movie together had 2 of those, and each one weighed like 40 pounds, and you had to
Yeah,
ship them. You had to ship them, and you try to tie them all together. All two cans consist of 8 reels, but they never. But UPS and FedEx didn't want you to do that, so you had to send them separately, but naturally one can would end up first, and then the other can would arrive 3 hours later, or wouldn't even arrive at all. And then like the theaters, you're always dreading opening week, because like Wednesday and Thursday, if the print hadn't come, it's like, oh shit, because they need time to build it up, which is tearing down the print and putting it onto one large platter. So there was like, oh shit, like it's come Friday, right? And there's only so much you could do at the time, because we were poor distributors. We wouldn't say, oh yeah, yeah, we have an extra 35 print. Do you want us to FedEx it to you, or we'll Greyhound it to you overnight, or we could, there wasn't a luxury, so we had to like we were at the mercy of like FedEx and UPS. And UPS was notorious for losing film prints, and it was like there was a theater in New York City. It was like Friday, and their matinee was going to start at like 2 o'clock, and they hadn't got the print. And then we were just calling every hour on the phone, every half hour with FedEx, and like it had gone to Hawaii. So like
mm,
they had to take it to Hawaii just to go to New York, which made no sense. So um so just the fact that it was cumbersome, then you got it, and so they were heavy. You had to tear them down under reels. You had to splice your trailers in. You had to make sure when the movie was done that you wound them back on the correct reels. And sometimes these projectionists were just overwhelmed, or they didn't know what they were doing, and they would put the wrong numbers on, or or no identification at all. So then the theater would be like, well, the movie came, but it's not labeled from 1 through 6. So I don't know. Like I see reel one, but all the rest have no have no labels, identification marks. And so I said, like, what do you see? He says, well, I see like there's a lady with a ship, and the ship is porting or something. And then I go like, okay, 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 that's reel 4. So put that next, put that, and it was crazy. Like if you didn't know the movies, then you don't. I'm not saying these are rare circumstances. They were, they didn't, they weren't the norm. But when they did happen, which was rare, it was like what do you do? Like I remember there was a Hong Kong movie that I put out. It was called Black Cat, and it was a remake of La Femme Nikita. And there was a gentleman in Chinatown. He owned a theater. Now the way they distributed movies to these ethnic circuits, I would say we call them the ethnic circuits, which is basically like in every city, major city, you would have these, Chinatown and little Tokyo markets, but mostly Chinatown. And you actually had these theaters that only showed Chinese movies, and they were Cantonese. They were Cantonese and Mandarin. They were both actually. And then you had this whole string of national theaters that showed Indian movies, Hindi. And so the way they would do it is, and this is crazy because like, and I got this advice from an Indian film distributor, and it was like because Indians don't trust other, and these are not my words. He was like because Indians don't trust each other. We'll never trust that if we send them our movie and they show it and they say we've sold like 300 tickets, they'll never tell us that they sold 300 tickets because by that time this was before digital. There was no electronic ticket counting, except you had it in AMC, but that technology was expensive. So for all these mom and pop places like the Indian theaters, like the Chinese theaters, they give you like a little row of the raffle ticket, and you tear it, and here you go. So this Indian distributor was like, okay, so we don't trust people, so other Indians who run theaters because they'll never tell us anything. So what we do is we say, hey, okay, so Mr. So and so, you want the movie? Here, you can buy the print. So here's our latest, biggest Hindi epic movie, and you can buy this print for $25,000. And at that time, I think a print of an Indian movie would cost me about 3,000 or 2,000. So I made like a $22,000 profit. And so basically, if the theater made 10,000 on that, they lost their shirts. If they made 50,000, they made money, and Mr. Rights holder who sold them the print doesn't get a dime on that. But it was a great system, and that's how the Chinese did it. Um, for these Chinatown theaters, they would be like, okay, you want to show this movie? Do you want this Jackie Chan movie? Well, not really so much Jackie Chan because that's more proprietary. They're more licensed, but a lot of these smaller independent films that weren't run by like Golden Harvest, they'd be like, okay, you want to print? You want this Hong Kong? You want this Chinese movie? Give me $8,000, and I'll give you one print, one 35 millimeter print, and then so that's how it works. So that's how like the Kim Sing Theater in Chinatown amassed that big collection of Hong Kong movies from the 60s and 70s that Tarantino wanted to buy. And so there was this other theater in San Francisco that I ended up working with, and he was in the same situation. He says, "Well, I have these movies. I bought the prints. I own them outright. Do you want to do that? I've got two prints of this movie. Blah blah blah." So I said, "Okay, fine." And it was a remake of La Femme Nikita. It's called Black Cat, and we showed it in L.A. So the print in L.A. was running. I got a second print from him. It never reached my hands, so he shipped it to New York. I forget which theater we showed it at. Well, it was actually for a press screening, and my publicist is like furious. He's like, "This bleep 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 print. What's going on? What the hell is going on?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He says the projectionist doesn't know how to put this together. It's all messed up. The lettering's in Chinese, and I can't tell. Well, I says, well, look, is she in jail? Has she killed this guy yet? Does she look like an assassin? Does she have the arm with the ice bullet? So I was trying to figure out what in the world did he have, and like he had. So this gentleman that gave me the print for distribution in New York, I mean, he didn't even know either. And the publicist was like, harassing him like, somebody played football with this, they're gonna pay. I've got so and so from the New York Times there. I've got the Village Voice, and they don't know what's going on. The projector had to stop because it's like out of order. And then what? And then so like I didn't know what to do. My hands were tied, and the movie was opening obviously that week, or the following week. There was no way to get another print or to see what was going on. And so we just had to bite the bullet on that one, and the press screening went through as is. But then when the press releases, when the critics came out, I remember reading, like, I think it might have been The Voice or Time Out. It was something like, this is like a, they say like, this is like a straightforward retelling of La Femme Nikita or something to that extent. It says, but it's very bizarre because like one scene, she's about to get raped by a truck driver, which she does. What leads to her getting imprisoned in this La Femme Nikita type CIA operation is that she kills this truck driver, goes to rape her like at a truck stop. He rapes her, and then like she kills him. She like blows him away. She like takes the gun to his grave. She blows him away, and he's dead. And then she gets arrested and goes to prison, and then that's the La Femme Nikita story. So apparently, this print that arrived, it was missing that whole action sequence where she kills the trucker. So literally, it was going from like he's about to rape her, and it cuts to she's in jail. So the reviewer for for the Times was something like, it's bizarre because she's like going to be raped by this truck driver, and now she's in prison. He says, I guess something happened that she did wrong. Well, yeah, and it was, and he says something to the extent like, who wouldn't do something wrong if you were going to get raped by a trucker? But I don't know how this all relates to the 70 millimeter. How we'll have to backtrack. Well, I guess the idea that was cumbersome. So in other words, 70 was double the weight of 35 millimeter for the reels, and just getting them on platters. Although they project typically 70 like in reels of every 40 minutes. I think. Or they might have just kept 20-minute reels because it was so heavy. It was so heavy to begin with. But what I'm getting at is no matter how cumbersome, no matter how clunky and archaic the technology was, it was something that had worked for, over 100 years. Uh, and I think the rewards that came back with watching celluloid was so much that it influenced, generations of people who, that's what I'm doing this, I'm trying to publish this research paper on. I mean, if anybody has a scientific journal they want, I'm game. But I'm trying to publish this article this research article that I'm working on about the effects of when people watch celluloid, like something like 35 millimeter film, acetate, mylar, stock, light bulb, tungsten bulb, arc light bulb projecting onto a screen versus like something that's digital coming from a digital device at 20,000 lumens or whatever it is, and what the psychological effect is of that for. And just in my research studies is that like watching regular film, prints, you could watch them longer. You can spend more time in the dark. It affects your melatonin more. It calms you down a little bit more. Just the psychological effect and the physiological effect that it does while watching celluloid. So then, and they tested this. They said, okay, watch 3 hours of this and 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter. We're gonna project. This is our xenon bulb. We're gonna project like at this wattage, and then this is the height of our screen. We're going like at 15 feet, 20 feet, and then they said, okay, so then we got the data there, and let's do it in digital. Same, what do you call it? What do they call it? The same research protocols, everything in place, except you were now watching digital. So digital projector, DLP system. Uh, didn't address sound too much. We're talking about visual, and then the results were that watching something for elongated periods of time digitally on a screen, because the way your eyes perceive things, don't forget you perceive things in your eyes, and then then your cognitive approach takes it in information and translates it into meaning. So when you're seeing light beamed onto a screen back into your eyes, they said it created more stress over elongated periods of time, more restlessness for sure, more ADD, and just an overall feeling of you know, unhappiness. Now, obviously, does the research go into placebo and stuff and all of that? I mean, no. But I mean, but it's just on the basis of that. It just tells you, like, like no wonder these 24-hour theaters, these flop houses were so popular because, and I mean, naturally, a lot of homeless people stayed in them, like the Tower Theater, for example. Uh, But the idea, I like the idea that it says it induces this melatonin reaction, that it releases more melatonin. So you feel more comfortable. You feel cozier when watching a movie projected on film in a darkened environment. Whereas if it's digital, you just feel, and I feel that now. What we didn't really analyze quite yet was that, how much of that is like the movie or the content you're watching, like how much of that is the editing. Because obviously, if you're going to see like a Tarkovsky movie where the shots are very long and slow and meditative for several minutes at a time, versus something that incorporates 200 shots in the same amount of time, that's going to create more stress on you. Um, you know what I mean? So it's interesting. But it's something I felt too, because I was like, why the hell? Like, it was like watching, like, I don't remember the first digital projection films I was watching. I was like, okay, well, I mean, it looks good. Uh, I don't think people get that they're not watching, even though they might be watching like an older film, they're not watching it how it was on film. Because the problem is that they're taking these original camera negatives, which aren't color timed, and then it's typically somebody that's not experienced, because a lot of these studios lost their repertory people, like Universal and MGM and Warner. They lost their knowledgeable people, so people are just guessing how these camera negatives look at the lighting and the color, and they're just guessing, because at that time there were a lot of interpositives and internegatives, but they don't use those as sources for data for negative scanning anymore. They're coming straight from the OCNs, which don't look at. I mean, they're great. Yeah, take a photo, take a negative of photos from your grandmother or your family, and make a print off of it today. It'll be gorgeous. It'll be gorgeous. But what the guy at CVS or whatever it's called at the time, like, they had their ways of knowing, like, okay, well, this type of stock lends itself to more blues or greens. It should be contrastier. Um, you know, so the problem is that you're not really seeing like how a movie looks, and that's where I love looking at old VHS tapes, because VHS tapes, and do you remember RCA, the video discs, Disco Vision? I think it was called Disco Vision. Yeah, was it Disco Vision?
Oh,
The one,
select division.
Selectavision. That's right.
Oh,
That's right. So if you see those, I don't know, up until like, I think even up until like the mid '90s, a lot of those transfers were made off of prints, release prints of the time, and and a lot of them were made from the first release prints ever for some of these movies from like the '70s and '80s. So you're getting to see how the grain looked. Uh, and you can always tell if it was made off of a release print or not, because there's that circle, the cigarette mark, which was only inherent in release prints, because they told the projector you've got to change the projector every 20 minutes. So it'd give you like a warning bell, like 15, 20 seconds before, like it'd give you a warning, which meant like start the motor, and then you see the circle, and then somebody see a second set of circles and say, okay, really start the motor. And then you finally see like the third circle mark is like press the button, and that would cut off the light on projector A, and it would switch on the light to projector B that had the next reel in the sequence. So yeah, so I mean, so a lot of that is lost on history. No, I haven't really gone back. Like, I haven't gone back to see, like, because they're like some of the classics they're always redoing. But how does like Sound of Music look now? How does West Side Story look? I mean, I imagine 2001 is transferred to hell now. I mean, that movie is constantly transferred, but you can't screw up that because the way Kubrick shot the film, and because it was 65 millimeter or 70 millimeter, there's only a certain finite number of elements you can work with, and a lot of those elements already have his color schemes timed in, so you can't change it if you wanted to, unless you totally went out of your way to change it. So a lot of that's consistent. What I didn't figure out is I don't know that I think Christopher Nolan did a reconstruction or wasn't really restoration. I just think he made a new print and then he added in digital sound. And I don't know how it sounds now. If they're using the original, well, I mean, I'm sure they're using the original 4 channels, but I don't know if they added, new stuff. But this revisionism is pretty tough. Like it'd be like, like I was watching The Killer the other day, the John Woo movie, and I can't believe the movie is 38 years old now, 37. And during the opening fire scene, like I remember dealing with the movie because I put out that movie for a brief time theatrically, and all of the prints were mono. That movie was in mono, but it was a really damn good mono mix with all the sound effects, but everything was compressed. So like, yeah. So you never heard the higher end ranges of the bullet shots. Um, it's all compacted, which is good because then it directs you to one sound, and that's what the Beatles liked about mono recording. They were like, yeah, 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 we liked mixing Sergeant Pepper, I think, or we liked mixing Rubber Soul in mono because it was just one box, and we knew how to like listen to that one box, and by that box at the time like speakerphone, like they'd mix with George Martin. And they were like, yeah, we could hear everything in one speaker, it made sense. But then when Capitol wanted them to start doing, or Parlophone wanted them to start doing stereo, they were like, gosh, what do we do? What do we do with this extra channel? Because they didn't know, because they always recorded like one single track, and like you added your vocals, which was track one, right? And you added your orchestra, and that orchestra could have been maybe 7 channels, and then and then you had your instruments, right? And maybe take these 12, 15 pieces down into one channel. So I was watching the Killer the other day, and they were like, oh yeah, this is like updated, it's HD, and it's got HD sound or whatever that means. And all the sound effects are just totally redone. I mean, they were taking like a Beretta and just they were just firing it off from today, and it sounded like it was from today. And that I felt that it took you out of the movie by having those noticeable effects. But how much of that is because I remember it differently? Like, does anybody today give a shit? Like they say, oh yeah, yeah, sounds good. I hear the gunshot now from 4 speakers. So um but you're not watching it. You're not watching it the way that it was intended. I mean, even at that time in 80s and 90s, when they were making, well, they'd make the movie in their native language. So in that case, that movie was Cantonese, right? And then they'd
Right.
then they'd export it, and whoever went, like I think there was an English dubbed version that Circle Films, who I did booking for, put out, and did and certainly like different languages. But what was I saying actually? I lost
Killer,
what, sorry. Yeah.
the killer, mono.
Well, no, so what I'm saying is that they're adding like layers and layers. Now you could do that like in a Chinese movie where they had a track like where, okay, so for so when they dubbed it in English, they dubbed it in Spanish in 1989, 90. They had their tracks, they had their separate music tracks separate, and and then you would add your own sound effects, which they did. So naturally, the moment that Killer came out for international export, there were multiple versions that existed orally, sound wise, anyway. Just because when you compare it, like when you compare the M&E tracks of the dubbed version, the music cues come in differently. Now they're the same music cues, but they come in differently. They come in louder. They come in over dialogue when when they're not supposed to. Because obviously John Woo or the editor didn't oversee it. Because nobody gives. I mean, people don't pay a lot of attention to like the foreign export versions of their films. Like I don't even pay attention to my to sometimes when I make movies for international. Like I don't listen to the M&E tracks. Like I don't say, was that the same siren that I used, or did you just add that siren in, or or was that the same guitar player, guitar riff playing, and like I like so the moment it came out, it was multiple versions, but here's a situation where there's a deliberate way of wanting to change it. So they're saying, okay, well now we're making it in surround sound. We're giving you new sound effects, just like the waves crashing ridiculously in Vertigo. That's what you're getting, and you don't, it's not. You're not going to take like, okay, you're not going to take. Would you take George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue and add a violin? Or I mean, it's like that. Or would you take one of Mozart's Jupiter, and would you say, okay, now we're going to have this underlying consonance line to build suspense. That's exactly what they're doing on these new mixes, which so you got to weigh it. Do you want the new people to watch it on, to watch the film, period? Yes. And does that mean some revisionism is necessary? Just like you got to weigh the costs and the advantages, and the rewards versus the disadvantages. And I think the advantages are better. Watch the movie, but then watch it, but it sounds a little bit, sounds a little bit. In some cases, it sounds like a lot is different, especially when it comes to music. And there's egregious examples like Enter the Dragon, where I think in 1997, Warner's hired Paul Little to do a restoration. Basically, I think what he took was he took their existing IPRIN and he made a new print, and he brought back the scene with Bruce Lee and the abbot played by Roy Chow. But in doing so, when he made a new print and a new mix, I think it was something like stereo for the first time, because Enter the Dragon was mono. Would you believe? And I think when he did that during the process, he wasn't. I mean, he was a fan of the film, but he wasn't like really a filmmaker to say, "Oh, that's right, that's wrong." So when you look at the film, like, when Jim Kelly sees the cops in the alley, remember the scene where they're introducing Jim? Do you know what I'm talking about?
The top and nighttime? No, no, or you said the gym?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, and then those students are practicing martial arts.
right. That scene. That scene. Anyway, that scene when they're talking to him and he beats them up. Like, remember the two cops stop and they say, "Hey, this guy's got a passport. Where's he going? He's going to Hong Kong via Hawaii. Oh no, he's not going to Hawaii." Then he fights them. He says, "Look what we have here. Are you attacking a police officer?" And he beats them up, right? Well,
Mhm.
that whole movie, there was the whole movie for the better part of 18 years, from its original theatrical inception, to like 98 when the restoration occurred. There was no music. There was no music in that scene. Now all of a sudden you watch 98 and they added this like sort of funk music cue to that scene. It's like dun 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 dun, and he's beating them up, and then he speeds away in their car. Like that wasn't in the movie.
That should left alone.
Ridiculous. Yeah, and then it just gets worse and worse. Like at the beginning of the final competition scene, where Mr. Han says, "Good morning, Mr. Roper. We've been waiting for you." There's supposed to be this great cue in the original version where you notes the end competition, the end battle coming. This signifies the end of the movie. Um, I think the sequence is like the Braithwaite character played by Jeffrey Weeks. Remember he gets a telegram. He's sleeping. He says, "Oh, what did this?" He says, "Why didn't anybody tell me this?" And he says, "Like he says, put your corner on." And he says, "Well, wake him up. I don't care if he's not alone. Damn it all, you buddy, I'll put him on the line." Right. And then the original 1970s version, there's immediate music here that goes da 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 da. I did it fast, but that's missing from now the way people see it. That whole thing, and then so now it's just like it's silent. They're walking. You see John Sackington just walking towards the competition, and there's no suspense. And I don't know how that happened, but I'm just saying like do I care because it's as I grew up with, and people are getting to see the film, or should I care because to me that was like a how do you call it a transitional moment in the movie when you knew, okay, it's going down now.
Right.
so so I don't know, and not much is really talked about this on blogs or podcasts or anything. 'Cause I don't even know that the hosts or the reviewers even know this. No, I mean, I suppose if you're well, they do. Some people are obsessed with the minutia within the circle of movies that they like. Like you will find people like, well, there was a whole backlash like that movie, Profondo Rosso, the Dario Argento movie, also known as Deep Red. And that movie, I mean, well, first of all, it's a great movie, but that's beside the point. That's what I'm talking about. But at the movie, if you recall, right, David Hemmings eliminates the killer, right? I'm not going to spoil too much, but he eliminates the killer, right? And then remember, there's the whole elevator and blah blah blah, and we know what happens to the killer. And then there's a pool of blood on the floor, and in the original version, the credits go up. You have a shot on the pool of blood, and you see David Hemmings' reflection in the blood, and the credits are moving. You have this crow going as you see David like staring, like looking in the blood, looking up, like he's in this very contemplative thought. Like it almost seems like he's going to cry. It's very interesting. Like he turns up his head, he closes his eyes, he looks down, and it seems like he's gonna cry. And you've got the goblin music playing. So anyway, so what happened was is that I think when oh, who was gosh, poor Bill. So sorry, Bill. Let's before Blue Underground. What was the company? Anchor Bay, I guess. Well, I think it was Anchor Bay or Blue Round. Well, anyway, it was when it was put out on for the first time on DVD or Blu-ray. They took the American end credit sequence of Deep Red. Well, actually, no. I'll get that to the moment. They they basically they took that same credit sequence, and I guess apparently it had been translated into English because I remember specifically when I first saw the movie on TV locally here on KHJ. Remember KHJ, by the way?
Yeah.
It was known as Deep Red Hatchet Murders. It was cut down by like 40 minutes. But it had David like looking into the blood, crying, looking up, looking down, and the credits were going up, but they were in Italian, I remember specifically, because it said like Costumi d'Italia de Giorgio, La Madre de Merte, played by Signora, that's what it said, right? So anyway, so
Right.
when this Anchor Bay or Blue Underground release came out, they had gotten a hold of the same credits, but they had been translated to English. So it said like, okay, instead of instead of like what do we call it? La Hijo de Madre de Carlo, which means mother of Carlo, that as it shows up in the original Italian credits, La Madre de Carlo. This one it said like Carlo's mother. So everything was translated, right? But here, get this: what they didn't do, they didn't have like they basically took a freeze frame of David Hemmings looking into the blood, and then they ran the credits over that. So he's frozen. He's not looking up. He's not crying. He's not closing his eyes. He's not in deep thought. And the credits just go up, and people had a fit. They had like a fit. They says, "Oh my gosh, it's wrong. It's had this." So so there is this obsession to such minutia. Well, I don't even think this is minutia because that's an important to me. That's an important moment too, because it's sort of, you see what happened to the lead character, the protagonist, after the murderer was killed. Uh, you know, so I think Blue Underground went back, and then they restored that to the original uh Italian credits, going over Hemmings as he's crying or closing his eyes. I don't know if you know that shot I'm talking about, by the way.
I didn't see the movie.
But to make things even
So,
more, confusing, though, the first time I saw it had those credits, as I explained, and those credits were in Italian. But I was watching a print of the American release by Howard. I think it was Howard Mahler, who put it out in '75. So how in the world did the American release, which was English dubbed, how in the world did it have the Italian end credit sequence in when it should have been the American, when it should have been the English sequence that was in the erroneous Blue Underground version? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did they end up not using, of all places, they should have been used in the American release? So stuff like that you notice. And but what I'm point but my point is that I feel in this case like you want to see David Hemmings you know cry or whatever. So um
right.
yeah, I mean, can you think of other examples like that?
I don't think so. Not that I can remember.
Well, I'm trying to think. It's like one of those things that you notice and like, oh, you know how this subject came up. This is how it came up. So, and this is crazy about the world we live in, and like social media and the way we get our information. So anyway, so I was watching Brainstorm because the YouTube channel, the official YouTube channel, has Brainstorm, and you can watch it for free, the whole movie. And I hadn't seen that movie like well, I saw it when it first came out in '83, but then I didn't see it again until maybe like 4 years later. So I had not seen it for a 30-year period. I says, I want to see Brainstorm. But how I got to Brainstorm was because of all places, I was looking up cowbell. Does that make any sense to you? Cowbell,
Cowbell. No,
cowbell.
no, no.
I think I was looking up cowbell because I was searching up SNL people. I was one day I got into like this SNL binge, and I was watching SNL, and then I just got obsessed with cowbell. And that's the whole skit with Will Ferrell that he did with Christopher Walken playing the band manager for Blue Oyster Cult, and they're playing the "Don't Fear the Reaper." And remember, he's doing the cowbell. So and Christopher Walken comes in and says, "Hey, we need more cowbell. We need more cowbell." And Will Ferrell's like pounding it, pounding, like, "Don't forget, come on, use the whole room. We want the cowbell." So
Mm.
that led me to Brainstorm, and because I wanted to see his performance again. And I mean, that's just a marvelous movie. I think, like, I really think it really deeply inspired, like, Christopher Nolan. Uh, I mean, it inspired, and even though it wasn't a hit, very underrated at its time because it was clouded in I don't say controversy, but it was clouded in this aura of Natalie Wood's death, and I don't think it ever escaped from that image, and that's why it never really found the major audience that it wanted. Not to mention that MGMUA has always been a troubled company, and they didn't want to release it. So, but anyway, if you watch this version on YouTube, which you should, because it's a terrific, it's fantastic. It's really fantastic. But Doug Trumbull shot the okay. So if you know the movie, Christopher Walken and Louise Fletcher come up with this sort of Oculus. It predates the Oculus. This is set in modern times, '83. There's Oculus, and through this Oculus, it reads a digital file that's basically like 3-inch magnetic tape, but this is digital, and it records the experiences. So like if you get stabbed, and then somebody like basically like I could record the memory of getting stabbed, and then I'll play it back for you, and then you'll wear the Oculus, of course, right? I'll play it back for you, but you'll really feel like you're being stabbed. In fact, you could probably die. So they so and and they tested on someone who's got a heart attack. They tested on someone who wants to have sex, so he records a sex dream on this tape. He almost has a heart attack. So naturally, the government want to take this technology, and they want to basically use it as mind control, because they think they could tell soldiers like, yeah, you fear nothing. This is the battle. You fear, and it becomes a dangerous tool. And Christopher Walken doesn't want to give them the technology. So, but anyway, so what happens is that the movie consists of these scenes, these sort of dream sequences, these Oculus sequences that Doug Trumbull shot in 70 millimeter widescreen. So like half the movie, when it's like set in the real world, so to speak, it's 180, 166, it's standard flat aperture. But then when it goes to like the Oculus scenes, the screen widens and it becomes CinemaScope, like 2.4 aspect ratio, uh, to envelope you. Like so basically you like if you saw this movie on a curved screen, the center of the screen would be the half of the movie. But when Natalie and Christopher wear the Oculus, then you would see the image expand on this wide canvas screen in front of you. Think of like the Cinerama. Um, and what he did was that he took standard 35 millimeter, and then he extract what he did was he basically printed a CinemaScope print, and then within that the center third was the modern life, and then the screen would just widen for the Oculus dream sequences, because it was already widened because the print was in scope 2.4 anamorphic anyway. So and he shot those dream sequences in 70 millimeter Super 65 2.0. I don't think he did an anamorphic squeeze like they did on Ben-Hur. So, but the point I'm getting at now is that when you watch it on YouTube, because we want it, because all these channels want everything nice and formally fitted. They want everything nicely in a box, and here and here. And by the way, what he did was like for the real world, the domestic world of Brainstorm, all the scenes are in mono, single channel audio. And then when you go to like the Oculus dream sequences, he goes to like full spectrum surround sound. So you really feel like you're in this other world. So I was watching on YouTube again, and for the most part, the transfer is great. But the biggest problem is that the dream sequence are completely shown incorrectly. They're squeezed, and if anybody knows anamorphic cinematography, what you're supposed to do in projection, whether you're watching in a theater or converting it for Blu-ray, you're supposed to unsqueeze those images. So like Natalie and Christopher are like very skinny talking heads, like stick figures, when they really should be at regular length within a 2.4 aspect ratio. I'm like, oh my God, is this how people are watching a movie and this is how they think it was shot? Because this is totally not the way it was shot. And what's funny is that on YouTube, other people have posted clips from the movie of the dream sequences, and those scenes are they're fine. It's just this new stream that MGM's put up on YouTube, that like who the heck, like who's running this show? Do they have any concept? I mean, they're probably paying somebody. First of all, they're paying somebody like nearly minimum wage just to color correct and re-encode. I mean, it might even be outsourced. Who knows? Who knows? But what I'm getting at is it's clearly going to be somebody who doesn't even know what this movie is, never even saw it. Um, and therefore is responsible for like encoding it for the world to see. This is totally wrong, and it's just a simple fix. And I don't know why they, and so this is what I'm getting, like people watching it, and I don't, and YouTube doesn't tell me how many views they get on a given feature film on their channel, uh, and they don't tell you how many, but when you look at like the comments and the number of comments and the frequencies and the times and months, you could tell that it's getting a certain fair amount of viewership. And I'm just sort of disturbed that, oh my gosh, is this how people are watching Brainstorm for the first time? Because that's not the, that's, that's not the way it is, but uh it's hard to say like how much of our reaction to stuff is stuff that's a reaction to stuff that's been already revised or developed. Like for example, I don't know if you know Maya Deren, the experimental filmmaker. Do you know Maya Deren from the 40s and 50s?
No.
No. Yeah, I think she lived in Silver Lake. I want to say Silver Lake, but maybe it was like Hollywood Hills. She was this uh, Russian artist, and she made these really awesome 16 millimeter black and white um pieces, you know, and they would show it like different societies and clubs, but I mean they never they never really went out into anything mainstream, but if there was like a museum screening, there was, but anyway, she made this. I think she's most known for this work called Meshes in the Afternoon, and I think it's 1947 it was made. And and for the most part, people seen it, they said this is great. She was known within that sort of art circle of filmmakers. I don't say it's like a clique, but that group here. And so at some point, like in the 50s, I think she got really popular, or she met the right people, and they said, well, you should do this. You should get you should make new prints of your films. Um, get them ready, finish them up if you need to, and let's put them out. So what she does with Meshes of the Afternoon is she has her husband at the time. His name is Teiji Ito, I think, Japanese Teiji Ito, and he does this music score to Meshes in the Afternoon. It's a great score. It's very experimental. It uses odd tonal note scales. It uses odd instruments. It sounds like he's hitting a cowbell at time or it sounds like he's hitting like an empty can of vegetable soup. So that music score, and it's only like a 20-minute movie. So that music score was added in like the 50s, and that was my intro to her. And so like I can't think of that movie on any terms without that score, but yet that score was added 12 years later. So in other words, my like for it is reacting is a reaction to the state of revisionism that it was at by the time I saw it. And so maybe this is so maybe when we're talking about sound and everything, maybe someone's going to say, oh, hey, okay, okay, brainstorm, okay, I get that they did it wrong, they showed the dream scene ones, but I like this, I like that, this makes sense, I like this. And maybe that'll influence people. Much like Meshes influenced me, but Meshes with a score, and is never meant to be seen. And same goes with like Charlie Chaplin's the Gold Rush. When I went, my first viewing of it was the 42 version that Chaplin narrated himself. But he took liberties when he edited that version. He made it 72 minutes. So he cut out. Well, I think he made it sound frames per second anyway, so it naturally plays a little faster, I think. But he narrates the whole 72 minutes. But what he does is he takes liberty because at the time he in his life. Well, he was always having personal problems, but in his life, particularly that time, I think like he was going through a divorce with an underage girl, I think, or something like that. It was very crazy, and he fell in love with this actress named Georgia Hale, who plays the female lead in The Gold Rush. So if you see the original 1925 version of The Gold Rush, they fall in love. He gets rich, right, or whatever. They go home on the ship, and they get interviewed by the press. Hey, how are you? How is it to do this? How is that? It's great. They interview the couple, and then there's this very poignant moment where they look at each other, and Chaplin smiles and he kisses her, and it's a real good kiss. It's a real meaningful kiss, and then the movie's over. So now the version I saw for the first time, which came out in well, I think the 42, yeah, well, the 42 version, but Disney Channel brought all the Chaplin films out in the 80s for on for there used to be a channel called the Disney Channel that you would subscribe to. Think of it like Netflix, is something like that. Uh,
Right.
so they had shown all the Chaplin works then, but they were basically these final revised versions. So the 42 version, he removed the kiss. So it goes from the being interviewed by the paparazzi, then they go up the stairs of the ship, the end. And so like, because I think Chaplin probably, I think he felt guilty about that relationship with Georgia Hale, and that meant it was too much on the head for him. So he cut out that scene. Because of all the scenes you're gonna cut out, why you cut out that scene? Like so, um, But then again, that's the way I saw it. And then it wasn't until like 20 years later when I saw the 1925, because I was collecting 16 millimeter prints, and I saw the 25 version. Oh my gosh, there's like a whole 2 minutes from then when they walk up the stairs. And he kisses her there. Um, so there's all these kind of revisions, and I just think the revisions are just becoming faster though, without any context. And I'll tell you this because I know that people are watching some of my early films thinking they're brand new films. They're saying, "Oh, it looks like it was shot on this camcorder." Well, it was a camcorder, yeah, and that from 1999. Or it needs this, or it's talking about this. We already know about that. I says, no, but this was done 15 years ago. So they're not getting a context of what they're watching. They're just saying, oh my God, it's great. Like here's a fad that I don't understand, but nevertheless, it's a fad that I will accept. Is that why do kids, or this new generation, why are they into audio cassettes? I hear this is the biggest thing. They're making new audio cassette decks, new Walkmans, um, and 1/8 inch audio tape is not a good format at all. I mean, it has some dynamicism to it, but it's weak. It oxidates. It sheds particles. It jams. You've seen the tapes. I mean, you've seen the tapes unravel. It's a total mess. It's worse than spaghetti. And so yet they're saying like, oh, we love tape. We want audio tape. That's what I don't get. Even like they're saying we like VHS, but like VHS, why? At least bring back like laser discs. When Criterion started putting out laser discs, like they had some kick-ass. They had great. They weren't interactive, but they had great supplements. Like I remember the first Laserdisc that Criterion ever owned was North by Northwest. It's got his storyboards in it. It's got some deleted scenes. It's got a new transfer from miniature positive. Um, and it was a physically superior format. Uh, Laserdisc was. I wish that the fidelity on the RCA Select Vision was better, because I think had that happened, um, we would have seen a lot more good things. Although we wouldn't know what those good things were at the time. We wouldn't because just like we didn't know till later. Like basically those RCA Select Visions are collectibles, because I don't know how they did this, by the way, but for some reason they got a hold of masters for movies where there are versions that don't exist. In other words, I think it was like Monty Python was one of them. Like when you see the Selective Vision, it is a version that exists nowhere. It's not on the DVD. It's not the theatrical. I would say if that was an isolated case, that'd be one thing. But there's like a list of these different Selective Vision titles, and they're like different. They have different sequence of scenes. and that's a pretty interesting mystery. So now, if only that technology were more stable, because I don't know if you've ever seen it, because I had one before. It's like it's like it's a disc. It's a 12-inch disc, but it's on vinyl. It's like a record. You're playing a record, and it's giving you you know data to play back a movie. But like a record, if you keep playing the same thing over and over, the record gets scratched. So in this case, not only does the record get scratched, but the picture jumps back and forth. So, like, if you ever have like selective vision discs of like smart of Saturday Night Fever in Greece, um, you know, you don't want to get those, because like Grease Lightning's been played 200 times on the disc. And I don't know what they say today, like for LPs, like for vinyl. They said something like, you can probably play it like 200 times before it gets noticeably scratchy. Um, so that was the same thing with these selective vision discs. I don't know that they were ever meant to be collectibles. I think they were like, well, they were meant to be collectibles because you had to pay. I mean, you owned them. It wasn't like, Pink Panther, you rent it and you return it, or Revenge of the Pink Panther. Um, but they weren't meant to be that collectible in that sense, because they scratch and they skip. And you would have thought in trials and research that they would have said, "Hey, it skips after 20 times, or there's too many grooves." But I think the idea was they're trying to fit a 2-hour movie onto two sides, and so the only way they've done it would have been like, remember when digital Laserdisc came out, so you had about like four, like my print of North by Northwest from the Criterion collection. It was like only 30 minutes per side, so you really had five sides to watch one movie, and that was annoying. And it wasn't even like a LP vinyl player where it automatically flips or whatever. This one you had to open the disc and put it in, and that affects the momentum of a movie too. Even if it's like a 1 minute gap, it's like changing reels. You know how that is when it's change reels. When it's not supposed to be an intermission, you're just changing reels and stuff. And uh, fortunately, Criterion was smart enough to know when the disc changes would be. Like, don't do it in the middle of Mount Rushmore, so or something, you know. So, but anyway, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how this will come out. I was just thinking of the different revisionistic ways. You know, I haven't been able to pay attention too much to what's been going on how films are presented. I know you go to all these repertory screens. Like, you go to the Vista, you go to where else do you go? You go to New Beverly. Where else?
Idiot.
Oh, you go to Vidiots, right? Vidiots. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you see a lot of stuff in DCP at the Academy. And where else do you go? Where else do you go?
Uh, yeah, from County Museum and Worcester and pretty
Yeah.
much all.
Well, but you're not, sometimes you're able to tell me, and sometimes you're not. You just, like you say, oh, it could be scratchy. But the problem is that I don't think you're aware of, like, when you're watching 35 millimeter, that it's always going to be scratchy at the beginning and the heads at the heads and tails of each reel, because those are the places that are most handled, especially if you're on a platter system and you're taking off the leaders. Your hands are touching that, even with gloves. Um, and so, like, no matter what, if it was a distributed print, or even if it wasn't, you're still going to get like dirt particles in that first 50 feet, 80 feet of a movie, and then the last 50 feet. You're really going to see on the last 50 feet, because a lot of projections had to add the real changeover cues by hand. I actually have one of those machines. What you do is you take a strip of film and you put it into this little how do you say, it's like a little groove. And I mean, it's almost like a splicer. So you slide it under here, like 2 frames or 3 frames where you want, because I think each real cue mark, like you see the flash on screen, it's obviously not 1 frame because you're watching a movie produced at 24 frames a second. So I think it's more like 4 frames that you're sketching in. So there's this little skinny like I want to say like a pencil. It's this little it looks like a tiny little screwdriver that you fix your eyeglasses with, like the circular screws. And what you do is you put it in the hole here and you turn it. You turn it like 6 times, and it leaves like a engraving on the print for the cue mark. And like I said, that goes in 2 sections. So it goes projections here, if they listen, they would tell me it goes like 20 seconds before the end of the reel, so they give you warning time. So then we would put the little circles in at the 20-second before the end mark, and then we put the little circles in on the at the last like 3 seconds of the mark. And that's why one used to go to these, which was pretty kick-ass at the time, that people can't another just another movie going thing about movie going that people will never know or never appreciate is that all the theaters that I used to go to that ran reel to reel, because reel to reel is safer, because when you're turning down liters and tails of prints, yeah, that 50 feet of scratchings is going to become 100, then 200. So you don't want to touch those as much as possible. So they would do what's called reel to reel projection. So, meaning they would never splice the film. So now there's reel one, you got it from the Academy Library. Just gonna project. We're gonna project it as it is, not touch it. We're gonna put reel to it into the second projector. The switch lights on the changeover mark. Boom, 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 and then you know, and that's what you get for an archival print. But a lot of this other stuff you had to had to do the cue marks, and that's something that people don't know. Because we used to hear a bell. I don't know if I mean I don't know when you started, or maybe you didn't even recollect what it was, but like at a minute or 2 minutes before the each change. So think about every 20 minutes of a movie, or every 40 minutes, depending on how many reels they were doing as a take up, you'd hear like this bell in the background and go ding ding. Like I would sit in the middle of the theater, and I think it was like the Four-Star Theater, for example, and that theater had like 800 seats. Was that big? 500 seats maybe. And you hear like ding ding ding, and that was a sign for like the projectionists to like, okay, you gotta get ready for the change, because most projectionists would live in they'd at the time, like when projectionists was a great job. Now there's no more such thing as projectionism, or doing a projectionist, basically, unless you're lucky and you're among the 50 places that can show film. But you hear this ding ding sound, and then that would be the sign of the guy to change it, and then you hear another ding 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 ding, and that was like when boom, shut the light, get the reel starting, keep rolling. And so you'd hear these ding 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 sounds like every 20 minutes. And then you're like, okay, after the fourth one, we must be at the 90-minute mark now, right? And then you could kind of gauge in your mind, like if you didn't have a clock or a watch, you could gauge in your mind like when the movie is going to be over, because you're like, this is pretty long. Like, okay, well, oh, ding ding, okay, 90 minutes. Okay, this is only 102 minutes movie. Okay, yeah. Okay, this is okay, I get it. You know what I mean? And sometimes sometimes I'd watch these Indian movies that'd be like 3.5 hours, and then you'd be at like 2 hours and 20 minutes, and you hear the ding ding ding. You say, okay, good, it's done. It's gonna be over. This typical Indian movies can be done. Typical Hindi. Then another 20 minutes, you'd hear bing ding ding ding. It's like, oh my god, how long is this damn movie? And then you hear again, ding ding ding. And then it's like I don't know if you ever experienced that, but um that was a lot of it, of being able to keep time, apart from visually just seeing the cigarette marks and knowing like, oh, okay, that's yeah, that's when the time changes. So anyway, that'll be all today.